Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. This is the full market analysis volume 43 heading into our first week of 2021. So we do have a few videos prepared for tomorrow. So gold, USD, JPY, basically all the JPY pairs. And we're going to have to take a look into those pairs for next week because we are looking at some big changes. So we are going to cover a few pairs for today, so this may be a short video. So we'll start off with Euro USD. So what we were looking at for this week was a downside move. We are starting to see a bit of a sell-off to come into play right now. So what we could be looking at now is, again, what we looked at is 1.23 as an initial target to reach. So I'm going to remove this for now. And ideally what I want to see is price to basically come down into this zone at least, and that is to test a prior support / resistance zone from a previous point back down the line. So yeah, ideally I want to see price come to at least 1.2. So essentially looking for a downwards play here. I don't think that we're going to still hold a down position. I think that we're able to push back up and take out the prior high here. So that means that we could be heading into 1.24 and obviously potentially a little bit higher. So we can use this as an initial target. So ideally a downside move is about 200 pips, then the upside move is about 400 pips. So there is a lot of potential play to make some good profits here. So moving on to the next pair, NZDUSD. It's going to be a similar outlook. Again, we are going to be looking out for a push to the downside. So last week we looked at a push to the upside, which we did manage to find. Now we're looking at just one final move to the downside now, and I'm looking to target this zone here. So roughly at 0.69. So if we extend this prior zone here, we could be looking at an essential push to the upside afterwards. So what I want to focus on is just that push downside initially, and then we can look at the next move, which I do think is a potential push to the upside. But again, anything can change after. So I want to see how price reacts to the downside move. If we do get an aggressive sell-off, then we could be looking at a further bias to the downside. So it could look something like this as the retest and the push continuation to the downside. But again, it's not really, we can't really decide on that move just yet. We just want to see how price reacts towards this channel. If we get a break to the downside, and if it's violent enough, we could see a further decline in this pair. And then we can look at the next scenario, which is either an upside move or a continuation to the downside. So looking at AUDUSD, if we pull up the overall chart here, what I'm looking at for this pair is, again, a similar thing, which is a drop to the downside. We could be looking at a push into 0.74, just as a nice psychological number. And again, I'm paying attention to this uptrend, so connecting the dots really. If we can get a break to the downside, this could signify a move to a further decline here. And then I will be looking to see if this is a very violent push to the downside, or if it's just a weak one. And then if it's a weak one, we could be looking at a push to regain that push to the upside. So we could look at 0.79 as a possible long-term target for the bullish bias. But again, the short-term bias, we could have a push to the downside, which is roughly 300 pips. Based on if we can head into 0.74, of course. But again, anything can happen. We could end up moving short. But I am just looking at 0.74 as a nice preliminary target. And the last two pairs we're going to cover, because we're going to cover the JPY pairs tomorrow, is USDCHF. Now, what I was looking at this pair for this week, again, we were looking at this bullish momentum from last week, and I did think that we could have a continuation more towards the upside, but obviously, as you can see, price didn't have that strength in the market, so we did have a further push but I still think that we could have again this route to play out. So I'm going to get rid of this long-term move and ideally just focus on the initial prior move, because we are looking to struggle at this point, trying to guess where this initial push to the upside is. So I'm going to focus on the next two moves, which again is looking at price to come into this zone here, so roughly at 0.9. So up here, and as we can see, we are starting to find some bullish momentum to come in. So whether this is enough to see price move to the upside, this is where we can expect price to move into. But ideally, my main move is towards the downside. I do think we have in a bearish position here. So I am just going to consider selling this pair. Again, you can look at a counter trend, which is towards the upside, which does have a good reward, just above 150 pips. But again, the downside move, looking to take out the prior low, wherever the low comes from. So it could just be under 300 pips. So again, it's just your personal opinion and preference. So yeah, that's ultimately where I'm looking for that pair. And then finally, for the end of this video is USDCAD. So what we looked at last week was a prior move to the upside, looking at this bullish activity. But as we can see, price had taken it out and taken the low further. So we're looking at a further push lower. So if we extend our downtrend and just keep an eye out on how price plays on this downtrend here. And ideally, I want to see how price reacts. If we get a really strong spike into the market, we could look at an initial target of 1.31, and again, see how price reacts and responds. But ideally, I want to see how again how price is able to push and break this downtrend. If we do get a strong push and follow through with this, we could see a big explosion, and there is a lot of pips up here. So what I think could potentially happen is a possible move to the downside and then that push up. So if we alter this, this could be a good point to look at. And we could look at 1.26 as a target to buy from and head our way into 1.31 as an initial push, so just under 500 pips there. But yeah, a route something like this could happen. So push to the downside and then that initial pump to the upside, that could be a nice play here. So essentially, that's all I have for this week. We are going to cover a lot of pairs tomorrow. So, of course, make sure you're subscribed to get all the notifications and you don't miss an update from us. And, of course, if you do have any questions, feel free to message us on our Instagram or our Telegram. We do also have a trading group that you can join. That link is in the description. And, of course, make sure to leave any comments that you'd like to, and I'm happy to answer them. So thank you very much for listening, guys, and we'll see you all in tomorrow's videos.